You know, these Nebraska Sandhill lakes, they're just dish bowl lakes, and this region of Nebraska is just covered with hundreds of lakes just like this. And these lakes are known for producing big panfish, but they're very cyclic. Low water years, the fisheries struggle down here. High water years, like we're having the last few years, these fisheries really rebound, and the panfish can be pretty incredible. Look at that! Oh my goodness, this is one of the biggest crappies we've ever caught on this show. You know, I look at all these little lakes in the Sand Hills of Nebraska, and it's, you know, just so many hidden gems. A lot of these lakes, you know, the public lakes, a lot of them have boat ramps, some of them have motor restrictions, some of them get pretty weeded up in the summer, but for the most part, a lot of these lakes don't get fished through a big part of the year. And so when you look at the fact that, you know, these lakes have, you know, pretty good fish populations, and some of the most accessible times to hit these bodies of waters in the wintertime on the ice, it's just a great ice fishing opportunity. Oh, wow, I didn't expect that. Just a tiny little tick, and wow, this is a good fish. Boy, that fish is just bulldogging. Oh, wow. Look at that, look at that. Oh, that is just a beautiful fish. These fish just have such a nice build on them. I'm just gonna unhook this. When you can lip a bluegill like a bass, that is a great fish right there. Just look at that. Fish just fills up that hole. Wow. I just love big bluegills like that. When they're tall and they just, man, I cannot believe the panfish that they catch down in this area. Pretty incredible fishing.
We're fishing the Nebraska Sandhill Lakes, or a Nebraska Sandhill Lake, and the Sandhills encompass about a quarter of the state of Nebraska as far as land area. And throughout the Sandhills region, these natural lakes, there's about 1,200 of these natural lakes. But most of the lakes are average size is about 200, 300 acre lakes, and not all of them can support fish, but the ones that do are very fertile lakes, very productive for panfish especially. Nice fish. Nice bluegill. What the sandhills are is they're just grass-covered hills that once used to be blowing sand, and over time there became a little more moisture in the area and vegetation started, and they've grassed over. But in the meantime, as these prevailing winds blew, it blew some of the sand clear out of the bottoms in areas and down to the static water level, which created these sandhill lakes. And in this area there's over 1,200 of these lakes in the Sandhill region, all natural lakes. In fact, it's some of the only natural lakes in Nebraska.
Oh yeah, that's a good fish. Come on up here. Oh yeah, look at there, a nice bluegill. Look at that. That is a dandy. Look at that. Oh, I love it when these fish just get so tall. Look at that. Just a beautiful fish right there. Right in the tip of the beak there. You know, this part of Nebraska, these sandhill lakes, you know, back in the day, you look at these lakes around Valentine, Duck Lake, there's a lot of these lakes down here, but they are notorious for producing big fish. In fact, this is one of the few places in the country where people would, you know, encounter fish that are up to 2 pounds. A drought hit this area, it was probably about 10-15 years ago, but then the water returned to this part of the prairie on the Great Plains, and when this area has water, you're going to have incredible fishing. And so a lot of these lakes are just starting to really bounce back. See you later. Oh, that's a nice one. Beautiful colors on them. This is in a gold Clam Pro Tackle X drop with some wax worms on it. Gold can be a really good color in a lot of these lakes. A lot of these lakes can be so stained, and if you can imagine in the summertime, these lakes can be really windswept and a lot of them get really weed choked. Then in the wintertime, they're really conductive for ice angling because a lot of these lakes don't get fished too hard for much of the year.
The lakes are almost all fairly shallow and the water quality is excellent. These sand hills are like a big sponge. It soaks that water up and filters it too. And then in these valleys, we have the wetlands and lakes. They're all relatively shallow, and that means they're incredibly productive. During the summer, it's just acres and acres of aquatic vegetation, and that's full of a variety of food items that the panfish like to eat, and even the bass and the pike eat some of those little things too. So they're incredibly productive fisheries and produce some of the fastest growing panfish anywhere.
Big burn, big burn. Got him. Oh yeah. He's a fighter. This is a nice bluegill. You can tell just by the way he spins. Oh, look at that fish. That's a Nebraska bluegill right there. Wow. Get him unhooked. Back down in the hole. It's important to release these big bluegills because these big, it's just for the genetics of the species. The bull males especially guard the nests, and so if angler exploitation, harvesting from the, the top down, the way that people always keep the big panfish, and that's exactly what you shouldn't do if you want to continue to catch large bluegill like that one. In our region, we go through droughts. It seems like we get a drought once every 10 years. Sometimes it lasts a short time, maybe 3 months. Sometimes it can last up to 2 or 3 years. And you just never know how it's going to be, but it always affects the Sandhill lakes. If we hit a drought, then our panfish don't reproduce. But a lot of times these lakes are so fertile that the panfish growth rates just zoom back as the water levels come back up as we get precip again.
Come on. Oh. Oh yeah, nice crappie. Oh yeah. Look at that, beautiful fish. It's so typical. We're finding these bluegills halfway down the water column. I've got a few stalks below me here in this hole. These crappies, they've been riding a foot and a half right underneath the ice. Beautiful fish. Yeah, we'll just let that fish go. There.
Good burn, good burn. Come on, buddy. Come on, fish. Ooh, we got him. Nice fish. Look at that bluegill. Oh, that is a pig. We're just down the outside of the pencil reeds, just into the soft bottom, but these fish are running just on the outside edges right now. Let's find another one.
What makes these lakes so unique is that they're not very big, and a lot of them are less than 300 acres. Typically, you're going to be fishing less than 7 feet of water, and for the most part, you're fishing the edge of the bowl, fishing around the rim where these basins come up to the shoreline. On some of these lakes, you're going to find some vegetation, but in a lot of lakes, you're just going to find submerged vegetation, like the pencil reeds that we're fishing today.
So these bluegill in these sandhill lakes, and all the panfish actually, are feeding on fairly large macroinvertebrates, any of the larva stages of a lot of the insects in this area, and they're very large in profiles. So a lot of the baits that I choose to fish are representing those large profiles of those larvae.
And today we've been having to use wax worms. We've tried soft plastics a little bit. Seems like bait's been producing the best in this particular body of water, in this particular spot. And I'm just using a loop knot on this jig, and I'm just threading on a couple of wax worms. Fishing about halfway down the water column, which in this shallow water is only about 3 feet under the ice.
We got crappies all across the state, although I'll tell you most of those are in reservoirs, pits, and farm ponds. The Sand Hills out here, we have fewer crappies, but we know that they can produce some big, fat, beautiful black crappies. So we've got a few fisheries out here in the Sand Hills where the black crappies are present, and those are another fish that we stock, especially where they're not common, so they may need an introductory stocking just to get those started and get them present in the system.
Oh, here comes one. You know, this shallow water, keeping that transducer up in the hole as high as I can. I'm trying to get my line right next to the transducer so that I can get in that cone angle. But in this shallow water, these fish just make a big mark. Oh, here comes one right here. Come on. Oh, wow. Wow, high fish came on right underneath the ice. Wow. I really stop it. There's so many pencil reeds in here that the biggest worry is just having these fish wrap up on these stalks and actually break you off. Wow, is that a good fish? Yeah, this might be a pike. It's a good fish. Or a bass. Oh my. What a big crappie. Look at that. Oh my goodness. This is one of the biggest crappies we've ever caught on this show. Look at that. Just a tank of a black crappie. Wow. That fish has got to be 16 inches. 16-inch crappie. Unbelievable. Just thick. Wow, look at that. Look at that fish. Just look how thick it is. Just a gorgeous fish. You can't build a more beautiful crappie than that right there. Unbelievable. That was a great crappie. And you know, the thing about this is that these lakes, every lake is different down here. There's some lakes that are pretty clear. There's some lakes that are really, really stained. When we're getting around these pencil reeds, we're finding more stain in the water. In fact, sometimes you'll drill a hole in one hole will be really stained water. When you drill a hole, the next hole 3 feet away will be fairly clear, but there's a lot of debris that hangs on these stalks and these reeds, and so you get up in the shallow water here, these fish are just running along the shallow lip. You go out in the middle here of these particular types of lakes, there's no structure out there, so these fish just hug the rim. And a lot of times it's shallow water fishing. What cover is in these lakes, it's pencil reeds, and it's just a matter of fishing the cover that's present.
These sandhill lakes are phenomenal, basically because the entire lake is forage, and these bluegill can spawn. There's emergent vegetation, you know, usually surrounding the entire lake. Not every lake's the same. I mean, every sandhill lake's a little bit different, but for the most part, you know, in the summertime you'll have submergent vegetation growing to the tops of the water. A lot of places you can't even get a boat in there after the 1st of June because there is so much vegetation throughout the lake, and all what that does is just promotes that much more insect activity. You know, the dragonfly, damselfly larvae during the ice fishing season. It's a huge forage base for these panfish, not just the bluegill, but all panfish.
You know, when you look at the state of Nebraska, you know, it's easy to think about all these big reservoirs, Merritt Reservoir, McConaughey. There's some really well-known fisheries in Nebraska, but besides the big reservoirs, probably some of the best kept secrets are all these small lakes. And you get up into northwestern Nebraska, where we're at here in the Sand Hills country, there are just so many lakes just like this. A lot of these lakes, they're only 6, 7, 8 feet deep. A lot of these lakes are fairly small, but they've got big fish potential.
Oop, got 2 of them now. Come on, little buddy. Come on, little buddy. Nice fish. Nice bluegill. Nice bluegill. Big fat guy. Sometimes you have to get out and hole hop. Just find the Roman schools. They'll come in 2 or 3 at a time, these bigger bluegill will. Nice, beautiful fish. Hold on, little buddy, we're putting you back. Back you go. But they'll just find the, what I like to do is try to find the active lanes that they're using so that there's higher percentage of bluegill going through a certain area when they're roaming. But once time of day changes, they might change their pattern on where they're roaming. Like I moved from the inside of the weeds where they were earlier in the day to they seem to be on these outside weed edges a little more right now, and they're moving a lot faster. In these shallow lakes, as the barometer changes, the fish will move up and down in elevation of the lake too. For these lakes, you know, the mean depth of this lake is probably only 3.5, 4 foot, so they don't have a lot of room to to run. So they sometimes that pressure will just make them set on the bottom. Other times they'll get to roaming like what they're doing right now. They'll just really scoot.
Looking back, you know, the early stages of Ice Team, you know, there's a handful of guys that are really instrumental, you know, and down here in Nebraska, you know, Don Cox was a man, and you know, a great fisherman, but what maybe even separates him even further is just a great guy. You know, you always have a good time when you're around him. He never has a bad thing to say about anything, just a class act guy, and just always a guy I've always enjoyed spending time around and enjoyed fishing with. And so, you know, he's been up to Devil's Lake on my home waters a few times, and it's just great to get down here and fish with him down here in his backyard.
Here it comes, here it comes. Got him. It was wrapped around the transducer. Get off there. Nice fish. Beautiful bluegill. Nice fish.
You know, this bite that we're on here, it's just a classic example where sometimes it pays to have a little bit of patience and just to hunker down on a spot, especially when you kind of get in that zone where you're located on the X where these fish are traveling through. Every fish that comes through along the edge of these pencil reeds, they're going to come through the same area. They're going to follow the same route. And it's almost like being a deer hunter sitting on a tree stand. You want to be on the trail, and these fish are just come along these same channels, these same routes, and you're just hunkering down and picking off a fish or two each time they came through. And that sit and wait method can be very productive. And sometimes, you know, there's a lot of times where if you're on the X, that's going to outproduce people that are running all over the place, because you just have to wait out those fish movements at times.
Here it comes. Here it comes. Oh, got him. Oh, this is a good one. Oh, man. Wow. Fish like that never gets old. The first time I met Jason, I knew that he was going to be one of those guys. He just had it. And we've had a lot of fun ever since. I always look forward to getting together with Jason, and very excited to have him down here in Nebraska finally to show him what our Sand Hills are all about, what these lakes are all about.
Oh, wow. When you get this shallow of water, there's only 5 feet below the ice. They don't have much room, but boy, they duke it out. And the big worry is just getting these fish wrapped up on a stalk. Oh, look at here. Nice big male. Look at the beautiful colors on that. Oh, wow. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous fish. Wow. Beautiful fish. Wow. Look how thick that fish is. Just so much girth on these fish. Boy, yeah, look at that. Just the girth on these fish. They're just gorgeous. But you know, that's the thing. You take high water cycles, or you take this terrestrial vegetation, you know, these depressions more or less, and then the grass can grow up, and you add water to it, and whenever you get a high water cycle, you just get phenomenal growth rates. You get all kinds of invertebrates in the water for these fish to eat, and you know, it can be boom or bust. But I tell you what, when you get the high cycles and things are clicking out in this country, it is incredible.